hello. Welcome, everybody, to Celebrate Colorado. I'm your host, Roger Cordoba, right here on the Radio Colorado Network. Boy, today on Celebrate Colorado, this is going to be fun. This whole thing, how it fell into my lap, is kind of amazing, actually, and I'm sure you're going to be interested when I tell you who's on Celebrate Colorado this week. First of all, before we get our guest up, and I'll tell you why our guest is on Celebrate Colorado, let me tell you, or let you know, how you can get in touch with me if you have ideas for Celebrate Colorado. Really, there's no set format. We just kind of look at anything, everything. If it has to do with Colorado, that's pretty much the only criteria we need. So all you need to do is get in touch with me, and I'll tell you how to get on the show if that's your ambition. Of course, it has to meet my criteria. Not everybody who says, hey, Roger, I want to get on the show. You have to have some kind of worth, It's got to be something fun or exciting or informative or educational. I'll make that decision. So you get to call me, 303-776-2323. 303-776-2323 is the phone number here at the studio. Just ask for Roger. Or you can email me if that's the way you want to do it. That way I'll respond and we can communicate that way. Email address, rockandroger32 at hotmail.com. That's ROCKNROGER 32 at hotmail.com. And now let's get on to Celebrate Colorado. The other night, my wife and I were thumbing through the channels. We have HBO. Now, we saw the previews of this show, a movie that I think it just started this week. Now, depending on when you hear this is late February, so I know this show will be airing a few weeks. So depending on when you hear it, late February, we saw these previews for a show called Temple Grandin on HBO. It was a movie. And my wife, she works with handicapped people with autism, and she knows of Temple Grandin. I'm thinking, well, who's Temple Grandin? And they showed the highlights of the movie. Claire Danes actually played the part of Temple Grandin. And I'm clueless. I don't know who this person is, but my wife, oh yeah, she's popular. Everyone knows her in the the autism world. She's a great advocate for autism because she herself, Temple Grandin, suffers from autism, if you want to use the word suffers. But anyway, so okay, that's as far as it went in my head. I didn't even think twice about it. The other night, we sit down, flicking through the channels, and Temple Grandin, the movie, it's actually on. So we sit and watch it, and I'm sitting there, and I watch this. And I am amazed. Not so much about, okay, this is what my wife was telling me about. Claire Danes was playing the part. But this woman, it just struck me. I don't know how many people really feel what is going on out there in the world of autism. I mean, anymore, back in the day, Temple Grandin, when she was first diagnosed with autism, I believe it was in the 50s, and we'll find out. We'll get her on here. She's actually going to be on the show. Temple Grandin's on the show. And we're going to discover how she was diagnosed back then and how she really had no chance. Pretty much, she was never going to talk is what they told her mother. And she didn't talk until the age of 4, I believe. And then she went on, and I'll let her tell the story, but she has done so much. She has done so much. She's come so far, not only because at one time in one of her books, she says that she was probably more discriminated because she was a woman as opposed to her autism. But she's actually a professor up at the Colorado State University these days. The movie was sensational. And, well, without any further ado, let's bring Temple Grandin on the show. Temple, welcome to Celebrate Colorado.
Well, it's great to be here.
It's so great to hear your story. It's so wonderful to see how far you have come. You're quite the role model out there.
Well, I just want to educate people about autism. One of the things I really talk about a lot is some of the sensory issues. Loud sounds hurt my ears. Fluorescent lights can flicker, and some kids have a lot of problems with that. One of the things I really liked in the movie was how it showed how my visual thinking mind works.
Thinking in pictures.
Yep, thinking in pictures. I talk about that in my book, but the HBO movie, which will play through March, is really, really, really showed it well.
So you're very happy with the movie, and it pretty much really right on documented your life.
I thought they did I thought they did just a great job. Now, obviously, in a movie, they have to switch some events around to cram things into a 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
But all the discrimination that happened with me in the feed yards, all that stuff actually happened. The bull testicles were put on my vehicle.
Bull testicles splashed all over the windshield of your vehicle. You had to. Now, was it true you had to go get it? I don't want to give away all the movie, but they wouldn't let you in because you were a female. This was after
That's right. They wouldn't let me in because the cowboys' wives would not like it, and that was the exact words that they said.
That's what they said in the movie, yeah. So then you snuck in. You kind of dressed up like a guy. You got yourself a pickup truck.
Well, and I snuck into lots of places. I did quite a bit of that kind of stuff, and also Claire Danes, the way she was able to imitate my voice, and also show the nervousness and the high anxiety that I had. One of the problems I had in the 70s when I was in my 20s was a constant panic attacks and anxiety attacks. And that's why in the movie I'd eat yogurt and Jell-O. But then after I started taking antidepressant medication, this would be after the movie's over with, boy, did I calm down. And the yogurt and Jell-O, I was able to get rid of that. I didn't need that anymore. Antidepressants may not work that well for depression, but I'll tell you where they really do work. They work fantastic for anxiety and panic attacks.
So to this day, you still somewhat would suffer from them if not for the medication.
Well, I would have the anxiety and the panic attacks. I know a lot of people and a lot of non-autistic people, especially some of the visual thinkers, where a little tiny dose of Prozac can just make all the difference in the world.
So depending on who you are, I was never a big advocate for Prozac, especially in younger kids and all that. But
I'm not a big fan of tons of drugs in younger kids, but there are lots of young adults. And as I went through my 20s, my anxiety got worse and worse and worse and worse. The nervous system was always looking for danger, even though there was no danger. I started taking a very low dose of one of the old tricyclics because Prozac didn't exist. And within 2 or 3 days, this horrible heart pounding and panic attacks went away. And I was also able to get rid of yogurt and Jell-O. Now, obviously, of course, I didn't eat it all the time, but I did have periods for 2 and 3 weeks where I had to eat yogurt and Jell-O because I had uncontrolled colitis.
And that was very well depicted in the movie as well. Now, let's start from the beginning. Your mom, you didn't talk until you were 4, right?
Well, Mother took me in. Actually, there was an earlier scene with a doctor that wasn't shown in the movie. The really bad doctor was shown in the movie when I was 4. But when I was early, I was taken into a neurologist.
Okay.
And she actually recommended a very good speech therapy clinic that 2 teachers just ran out of their house. And they were those older, really good teachers. And Mother could see that I was getting some progress there. And then she hired a nanny who played constant turn-taking games with me and my sister, and she could see that there was progress. That's one of the things that made her keep going. And then later on, we got the Freudian junk and all that stuff where they were just saying, totally useless. But Mother had already seen me make some progress.
So Mom wasn't giving up despite what the doctors told her. When did they actually diagnose you with autism?
Actually, when I was about 4, I was diagnosed with autism. You see, the problem is I was born in 47, so
okay.
I would have been taken in 49. Nobody knew what autism was. And the first doctor I went to actually wasn't a psychiatrist, it was a neurologist. So she tested my EEG, and there was no petit mal epilepsy, and they tested my hearing to make sure I wasn't deaf. And then she said, give her normal therapy, and recommended this little speech therapy school that was excellent. Those teachers were as good as any teachers today. This is where it just gets down to very good teachers to working with kids.
And then you didn't speak until you were 4, but you I don't know if you remember way that far back, but you didn't speak because you were always putting things together in your head. You were thinking in pictures, like the title of your book.
I was thinking in pictures, but I also had problems getting my words out, and it's important with young autistic kids to spend many, many hours working on speech, and you've got to push them a bit to get them to talk. Because if I had just been allowed to do whatever I wanted, I would have just sit and spin things around and twiddle sand through my hands. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of working at least 20 hours a week of one-to-ones with an effective teacher on these little autistic 2, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. The worst thing that you can do, the young autistic kid, is nothing. That's the worst thing you can do. Every expert in the field will agree with that.
Is do nothing. What do you recommend? If somebody, I know today,
I recommend getting the kid into a good program where they get lots of really good one-to-one teaching. There's going to be a lot of arguments over whether it's this program or that program, but the most important thing is getting a lot of one-to-ones with an effective teacher. I always ask parents, is your child progressing? Like, is he getting more words? Is he getting more eye contact? Is he getting less tantrums? Because if you're doing that, then you're making progress. It's really important. And if you're not making progress, then you may want to try something different.
We're talking with Temple Grandin. This is Celebrate Colorado. I'm Roger Quirtlebaugh. She has lots and lots of books she's written. The cattle industry, we'll get into that. The book I have in front of me is Thinking in Pictures, a story of Temple Grandin's life, pretty much. You can get all these books, obviously, at wherever fine books are sold, or you can just go to her website, and Temple, that's grandin.com, correct?
Yeah, that's got all my livestock books, and just go to the book section. And then I've got some little specialized livestock books, like humane livestock handling and transport, and those are books that mainly are going to be of interest strictly to people in the livestock industry. And then I've got 2 animal books that are much more general interest for people with pets. Anyone who's interested in animal behavior, and that's Animals in Translation, and Animals Make Us Human.
All right, so now we're going back. Again, that's Grandin.com, Grandin, Grandin.com, Temple Grandin.
That's right.
So today, I know in your life and your history compared to today, now you say kids should get out there and get some kind of help, get some kind of go to some class, get some direction, so they're progressing.
I'd strongly recommend that if you're a parent out there and you think your kid might be autistic, he's got no eye contact, he sits and rocks and he doesn't talk, contact the Colorado Autism Society. Go to your local parent support group. I think it's real important for new parents to talk to other moms that have a child with autism.
And there you go. And how far has autism come as far as treatment from your day back when you were a child, 4 years old, to here we are in 2010? You've seen it come a long way, and a lot of that is thanks to you.
Well, and also I had very good teaching. And then when I got into high school, the movie does a fantastic job of showing my science teacher. I was goofing around in high school and I wasn't studying. And Mr. Carlock got his honorary doctorate in the movie, and I didn't bother to change that. I thought he deserved an honorary doctorate. And he motivated me to study. Now, I was getting a lot of work experience at a young age, and that was really good. I took care of 9 horses when I was 15, cleaning their stalls, feeding them. I did carpentry work. I was painting signs. I was getting lots of good work experience, but I wasn't studying. And my science teacher got me interested in studying, because now I had a goal of becoming a scientist. And this is where a mentor teacher like that can really turn a kid around. And you can have the very mild autism that's called Asperger's. These are just kind of geeks and nerds. Or you got the kids, they label them ADHD, and they're out there getting in piles of trouble. And I think it's a shame that a lot of schools have taken out the shop classes and the art classes and welding classes.
Hear, 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 hear.
Because these are some of the classes where some of these kids that sort of, are not doing well can really shine, and that shop teacher or that art teacher can turn one of these kids around.
Well, you that's a whole different subject there, Temple. The art, the shop, and even sometimes they don't even let them play on have physical education classes anymore.
Well, the problem is kids need exercise, and I think there's way too many meds given out to little kids, and the first thing you need to do, instead of loading them up on medication, is make sure they're getting enough exercise. Exercise is extremely good for the brain, and there's a ton of science that shows that. And
see what they're good at. See what path they choose to go. But what about kids who are overly coddled and maybe overly protected, overly what do you want to say, babied by mom and dad? They know their child is special because they have autism, so therefore they know they're going to get made fun of. They know things are going to be thrown their way, so they overly protect them. Does that benefit them, or does that harm the child later on?
No, it harms them. You've got to get them out doing things. I mean, Mother was always getting me out doing things. I was originally afraid to go out to my aunt's ranch, and she said, well, you can go for 2 weeks or go all summer.
You didn't want to leave once you went out there.
And I loved it once I got out there, but you've got to get them doing stuff, and I was taught things like manners. I was taught to say please and thank you. I was taught when you go in a store, you don't touch stuff unless you're going to buy it. I mean, these things were taught, and you've got to expose kids to interesting stuff and get them out doing things. Now, the only thing you have to be careful about is sensory overload. There are some kids that just cannot tolerate a really noisy restaurant, and that's going to be very, very variable. And in Thinking in Pictures, I have a whole chapter just on the sensory problems.
You have the book is remarkable. If you just pick up one book of Temple Grandin, I'm sorry, pick up Thinking in Pictures, and of course the cattle thing. You mentioned you went out on the ranch, your aunt's ranch, and that's pretty much where, according to the movie. Now you tell me if it was wrong, but that's where you got into the cow thing, and you learned about the squeeze machine. Can you tell us about that?
That's absolutely right. And I would have never gotten in the cattle industry if I hadn't gone out on my aunt's ranch. And of all my autism books, Thinking in Pictures is probably my single most important autism book.
So tell us about the squeeze machine. You saw the cattle go through it. You wondered what it did. And in the movie, they said, well, it calms them down. It calms them down. Then it showed that your Temple's room sign fell off your bedroom door. You came in the house, you saw the sign on the floor, and you had an anxiety attack.
Well, would have anxiety attacks over just really stupid things. You see, the problem is my nervous system was in a state of constant fear because there was some kind of defect in my nervous system. So I was always looking for danger, always, any little thing could set me off, no matter what. And I watched cattle go in a squeeze chute, and I noticed they kind of calmed down, so I went and tried out the squeeze chute. Deep pressure is calming. A lot of therapists use that with little kids. Little kids, you can just do things like getting underneath the mattresses or cushions. And sometimes you do your speech therapy or some of your other kinds of therapy while you're doing the deep pressure. That can sometimes be very, very helpful.
And it helped you. You saw the cows, and you actually, during one of your anxiety moments, went through the squeeze chute yourself. And now, was it true you had your aunt out there tightening it up for you?
Yes, I did. Yep, that actually happened.
And then after a while, you realized, I need one of these. So you went. Now it was on to your first year of college. Is that where you first?
Well, actually, this is where a movie does have to change events around.
Okay.
The very first squeeze machine was in high school.
Okay.
I had a blind roommate in the movie. Actually, she was in graduate school, and they had to move her to college. They have to rearrange and switch events around, otherwise they just can't stuff.
Otherwise, it'd be a 5-hour movie. Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's the problem.
But you did go on and you built your own squeeze machine.
Yes, I did. Yes, that actually happened. And then I had the junky wood one, and then I had built a really nice one, and the really nice one was built from my actual original drawings.
And you created this in your mind, your Thinking in Pictures mind, that you create this stuff, and you were a genius, so to speak. Because I built a skateboard in high school, and that's my claim to fame as far as my woodworking. So I don't know what that tells you, but
I could see things in my head. You see, and the movie did a beautiful job of showing how I think in pictures. The movie showed that absolutely perfectly.
And they mentioned animal husbandry, and you immediately thought of a groom and a cow.
That's right.
Getting married.
Yeah.
And then you giggled.
Yeah, that's right.
In the book, Thinking in Pictures, you describe, and if you could kind of go through that with us, when you heard the Lord's Prayer at a younger age, what it meant to you and all that, and then as you later on, grew up and grew older, how it meant even different things to you. Can you go through that part?
Well, I had one of the things I was taught at a very young age. One summer program I had, the Lord's Prayer was sort of my assignment. And I learned it. I was probably, 4 years old. I had absolutely no idea what it meant, but I learned it. And the only thing that made any sense to me was the power and the glory, because then I saw a rainbow and an electrical power tower.
Right. And then amen kind of threw you off at the end. Amen.
No, I thought, what's a man doing at the end of it? And then I see a man.
Yeah, and what does the Lord's Prayer do you mean today?
Well, it's sort of, truly really abstract things I don't really understand. If I have to make a picture in order to understand stuff. And when I think about some of those kinds of things, I see this poster I got from the Hubble Space Telescope showing 100 galaxies way out there in outer space, and that's the sort of things I think about when you think about the stuff that's really unknowable.
Unknowable. In the movie, then we'll get to your whole cattle thing, because that's who you are now. But in the movie...
Cattle's what I'd much rather talk about.
Sure, no, I didn't want to throw you off on that, but you mentioned a horse, in the movie, a horse died, and then your science teacher, professor, he died, and your question is, where do they go? Where do they go? They were just here, now they're gone.
Well, I did a lot of thinking about sort of the ultimate meaning of life, especially when I was in my 20s. You got to remember the movie is all in the 60s and the
Sure.
70s.
Yeah.
Now my meaning of life is much more simple. It's like if the things that I do make something better, like when a mother comes to me and says, my kid went to college because of one of your books, or you really helped me understand how my kid thinks. Or, a rancher comes up to me and says, well, your cattle corrals really worked. And I see the changes I've made in the meat industry on improving the slaughterhouses, and compared to what they were doing back in the 80s, they were terrible, and they're way, way better now than they were back then. That makes me happy. I made real improvements happen out on the ground in the real world. And that to me now is sort of the meaning of life.
Taking advantage,
concrete and non-abstract.
Taking advantage of the time you're given. We're talking with Temple Grandin. This is Celebrate Colorado. Now, Temple, you started redesigning cattle chutes, and the way cattle, I guess, in the not olden days, but in the 60s, they had a lot of cowboys out there prodding the cattle, and you, in your mind, put together these chutes where it's circular type thing, where the cattle are calm all the way until the time they're butchered, or they kill them to make meat out of them. Tell us about that. Go ahead.
Well, I designed curve chutes. I cannot take credit for inventing curve chutes. They did exist before I started. But the thing that I did was to go to many, many feed yards and put together, the elements and in new kind of creative ways. And the other thing is equipment's only half the equation. The other half of the equation is you've got to have the management. I mean, you saw the scene in there with the old dip that, and they were jamming at them with sticks and things like that.
Right.
You've got to get people to stop doing that.
So you put together, you saw it in your mind, you actually went through there as a cow, and you know that cows are calmer if there's no distractions, that they move in circular positions, get all the cowboys' shirts and all that off the sides of the rails.
That's right.
And nothing, jingling, jangling, and they're calm. And this, that you had a hard time selling this at the beginning, but some magazine editor or a guy who wrote for a magazine said, you're a genius. This is genius of you. And then the very next day, they said, "No, this isn't going to work. This is ridiculous."
Well, there's just some people that just don't think things are going to work. And that incident with the metal plate, that actually happened. They did kill those cattle, and then it didn't show in the movie. I went back there and I got rid of the metal plate, and then proved to everybody that it did work. But they just can't get everything in the movie. But that happened, and those cattle did drown, and it was really bad.
Well, tell us where the success finally came, and it really started to catch on, and then also tell us how many of your designs are in use worldwide.
Well, where I've had the biggest effect has been into slaughterhouses, and I developed a piece of equipment called the center track restrainer system that holds the cattle during stunning, and the two big plants in Colorado have it, the one in Fort Morgan and the one out at Greeley. They have my system, and about half of the cattle in the U.S. are handled with equipment I designed. There is some statistics out there that's wrong. It says it's half the facilities. It's half the cattle, not half of the facilities.
But your design's out there, and you've had success. You got to be very proud of where you are in your life. And now you're a professor up at CSU. What are you doing up at CSU these days?
Well, I teach a class in livestock handling, and I've got several graduate students. I've had 4 PhDs graduate with me, and my latest one, Lily, is now an assistant professor out at Kansas State University. And right now I've got another new student who's going to be finishing up fairly soon, Kurt Vogel. I'm working on done a lot of work on dairy cow metabolism and welfare. And
you're still speaking a lot on behalf of autism.
That's correct, autism. And I do a lot of talks on cattle right now. I'm at Cornell University as a visiting professor here. And I just finished up a talk on beef cattle in a beef cattle class, and a talk on animal welfare for the veterinary college. And
this is Temple Grandin. If you would like more information about who she is, her story, I encourage, if you're interested in the cattle chute thing, the circular thing, I don't even know what the proper terminology is there, Temple, but she has all kinds of cattle books that'll help you understand this. You can go to her website, grandin.com, Grandin. Grandin.com, Grandin. Thinking in Pictures is the book that best describes who Temple is, and I highly, highly encourage, if you have HBO, it's simply called Temple Grandin. It's a remarkable movie. And if you have a child with autism, this is a woman, you got to follow her lead. Whatever she said, go ahead.
I just want to comment that the movie will be coming out in DVD in August.
DVD in August, that's one you even want to put in your collection. It'll make you look, you've been harassed, you've been made fun of, you've been called names all your life. And it just rolled right off your back.
Well, it didn't just roll right off. High school was some of the worst part of my life. In fact, I got kicked out of a large girls' school for throwing a book. Teenagers can really be mean, and it did. I had an easier time dealing with feedlot cowboys than I did with kids teasing me in high school.
Well, they weren't too easy on you either all the time, were they?
No, they weren't. But one of the things that finally won a lot of people over is I was good at doing things. And people thought it was really weird, but when they saw my drawings, they realized I could do things. And there's one scene in the movie I just love. It shows all those meat plant guys around the drawings. And those drawings that are on that conference table, those are my actual drawings. I went down to Kinko's in Fort Collins and copied those drawings and sent them to them.
Temple, God love you. Welcome. Thank you so much for being on Celebrate Colorado. Grandin.com. Thanks, Temple.
Thank you so much for having me.
Temple Grandin, Celebrate Colorado. I'm Roger Quirtlebaugh. This is the Radio Colorado Network.